No. Is that any way to greet an old friend?
We are not friends.
Your lord, then.
Lord Saito, the alleged Shogun of the North. If it were up to him, that would have been his official title. But on the mainland, and honestly even to a lot of people here on Ezo, he and his men around him are nothing more than bandits, outlaws, refugees who lost a war, refused to accept the defeat, and then ran north to pretend they hadn't been broken. They called the retreat a mission, a chance to establish a new shogunate in the north, a place where the people of Ezo could supposedly be protected from the mainland shogun's reach. But in reality, most on Ezo saw a man playing warlord, a ronin dressing himself up as a lord, surrounded by misfits and outcasts trying to rebuild a life that the battlefield had already taken from each and every single one of them. Yet to Saito, this new shogunate on Ezo wasn't exile at all. It was a tiger retreating up the mountain to lick its wounds. A beast sharpening its fangs, waiting for the day it would descend again. In his eyes, defeat was never final. A tiger is still a tiger, even when it's bleeding. Before we continue with the origins of the tiger on Ezo, there's something huge happening in one of the biggest games currently out. They're rolling out a major crossover with globally recognized franchise, one of the most iconic IPs on the planet, and it comes with exclusive champions, themed events, and limited time rewards. It's all time sensitive, so if you want in, now's the moment. And yes, you also get a brand new legendary champion that's never been released before. One of my favorites, Ultimate Death Knight, is back too. He soaks every hit for your entire team, heals off enemy heals, shields, and sustains your squad, and shuts down legendaries with provokes, fears, and attack debuffs. He's basically an all-purpose MVP in PvE and PvP with a 30% defense boost in every battle. And the wild part is completely free. Use my link or QR code, punch in the promo code UDKING, and grab him before he disappears again. If you're new, this is the best time to jump in. My link gives you a massive bonus pack you can't get anywhere else. Your choice of a free legendary, an instant starter boost, and 2 free epic champions, which are Ultimate Galek and Zargala once you hit level 15. And for new players especially, you can take advantage of one of 6 codes for your desired legendary champion. TREEHUGGER for Ruark, GETALICE for Alice, and DESERTQUEEN for Tuhan Narik, MONKEYKING for Wukong, DEMONSLAYER for Tholen, or UDKING for Ultimate Death Knight. Personally, I recommend MONKEYKING for Wukong, as I've been obsessed with Black Myth and I think his powers translate beautifully into Raid. Just remember, these rewards only unlock if you download through my link or the QR code. If you download the game any other way, none of this shows up. So hit the link, grab your rewards, enter your code, and you're all set.
Be named samurai, if they are brave enough to earn it. Clan Matsumai call themselves the Protectors of the North.
As many of the other Yotei 6 members, Saito too is known as a spiritual animal, or in the Oni's case, a mythical being. For Saito, it was the tiger. He doesn't utilize a mask like the other members do though. Instead, he wears the tiger proudly on his back for all to see. It even is decorated boldly inside of his castle on the island of Ezo. Interestingly enough, we do actually know the origins behind why Saito uses the tiger. According to his own letters, it's when he was a young child being prepared to be handed over to another clan that his father wiped away his tears and told him to have the strength and courage of a tiger. Drawing all the way back to these early days, Saito would form the lesson that you must lose everything in order to find your true self. Or at least that's the way he's currently portraying his rebirth here on the island. So far removed from those early days that he was far from fond of. He even says he was crying that day that his father was handing him over as a hostage to a rival clan. Now, historically speaking, this is fairly common in Japan at that time. In order to secure alliances and somewhat guarantee one clan wouldn't go back on their word and launch a surprising attack on another clan, they would offer up their children as collateral. It was an agreement that meant Narayaki Saito would live with the clan his father made a truce or agreement with. Saito would be dressed in their attire, treated such as he was one of their own, educated in their ways, and taken very well care of. He wasn't really treated as a hostage, but he wasn't allowed to go home either. The catch here then was, if Saito's father decided to betray this clan, Saito would be the first to be killed in the start or renewal of hostilities. Apart from that, the other catch would be that Saito himself would essentially be left feeling like an outsider. Typically, there's no established period for how long a child was kept, nor does Saito give a specific time frame apart from him saying he was just gone for years. Perhaps the significance isn't in how long he was gone, but in the feeling of being abandoned and not having his own place. That kind of displacement creates a deep sense of loyalty to the first person who welcomes you back and treats you not just like a hostage or just another clan member, but like a true lord. And for Saito, that person was Master Kengo. Upon Saito's return home, Kengo welcomed him back with a brand new sword, one fit for a proper lord. It was a move that, in essence, would come to reinforce everything Saito's father raised him on, the thought that he was to lead, to protect, and do everything necessary to provide for his clan. He was given away, as painful as that might be, but he served his clan well. And now, arriving home, he's given the proper gift to take the helm. This action would also come to form the foundation of Saito and Master Kengo's friendship. Perhaps with Master Kengo even supplying Clan Saito with much of its finest swords. It's during this moment we should weave together the rest of the people that later come to be known as YOTEI 6 members. Of course, the spider and the dragon, otherwise known as Sakichi and Ukichi, have yet to be born at this point. At least, that's what I'm guessing, as we don't have specific timelines. However, we can speak for the other three. The snake, whose real name was Yukiharu, was sold off as a young boy by his family to work the fields of Clan Saito. Eventually, he would come to cross paths with Nariaki Saito when he returned home and found great use out of Yukiharu's silver tongue, effectively saving him from tilling the fields and becoming the Lord's skilled recruiter. The original Kitsune, on the other hand, Oyuki, was actually not too different from Yukiharu's position. Her family served Clan Saito for generations, and it was through that heritage she would come to serve her new lord, who she firmly believed in up until that point. It's interesting to think that the snake and the Kitsune are most likely the earliest allies of Lord Saito, followed much later by the Oni. Unlike the other two, the Oni doesn't specify how he fell in with Clan Saito. We know he was at the Battle of Miki Takahara, winning glory there and having a painting of his victory, but that doesn't solidify anything more than that the Oni was perhaps 5 to 10 years older than Lord Saito himself, and that he was eventually on the same side Saito would later fight on in the Battle of Nagashino. That allegiance is still worth noting because it could essentially mean the Oni was an unusual case. I don't know about the rest of you, but I seem to pick up a little bit of bitterness or resistance from the Oni when Atsu speaks with them in Ishikari Plains. Yes, he does yell at her to respect Lord Saito and address him as such, but when brought to the topic of being the custodial power of maintaining Lord Saito's future seat of power here at the castle of Ishikari Plains, the Oni not only seems to resent the fact that he's here and not running the risk of dying somewhere on the battlefield as a warrior should, but he seems to really take that back foot of relying on the fact that this is just purely duty for him. This is a sense of honor, duty, that samurai mentality. It's not concrete, but this could hint at that the Oni was never part of Clan Saito or even directly under Lord Saito himself, which means it would have only been after the defeat of the Battle of Nagashino that the Oni would fall in with this odd bunch. The Oni would have been a surviving samurai. Not only that, a disgraced and wounded samurai since he was shot by a peasant. In the aftermath of this battle, many samurai were displaced. They became masterless, as many of their masters were either killed or taken prisoner, and then you had that bunch that were just absorbed into smaller clans, which is most likely what happened to the Oni. Again, assuming he wasn't already under or part of Clan Saito.
You're nothing but an outlaw now.
Is that what you tell yourself? Your father is a deserter. He abandoned my clan and infected others with his cowardice.
You were raiding villages.
We needed food! Do you know how many starved?
Thanks to Saito's own letters on defeat, we can confirm that the Battle of Nagashino would in fact be the first time he ever heard gunfire, which to him would have perfectly been a terrifying psychological weapon that would quickly prove in his mind that this would indeed be the future dominant force in warfare. He watched as his generals were cut down and men who served his clan for his entire life were left on the battlefield completely unrecognizable. This battle, of course, would be the catalyst for the events of the game, yet despite this crushing defeat, Saito would not accept it. Instead, he was determined to keep his clan going strong, leading his family and remaining remnants of his clan into exile into the north, where he believed they would all thrive. Instead, they would all starve. The starvation has many historical traces to it as well. Apart from the side Saito fought on, completely losing all rice reserves, food caravans, baggage units, or just regular horses carrying additional armor and supplies, their enemy forces would ravage all rice fields, storehouses were looted, rice taxes were collected or seized, and farmers were either killed or completely abandoned their harvest, which would only continue the depleted state of the region if that happened because Japan's agricultural cycle is quite brutal. Rice was typically harvested once a year. Nagashino occurred in late June of 1575, which meant that if the farmers fled or were killed, the summer planting season was missed, no autumn harvest could be expected, and clans returned home to emptied fields, with the addition of winter setting in with no reserves, implying that Saito and his forces weren't the only ones walking into a guaranteed famine. The famine Lord Saito and his forces faced was so bad Saito would come to greenlight attacks on villages, razing them to the ground and stealing whatever food they had in the process. An act that, despite it being out of pure desperation, would come to be the exact reason as to why Kengo and his wife Yone would leave, and convincing many others to do so as well. With the abandonment of his closest friend and seeing many others follow behind his master swordsmith, Saito would mentally mark it as the moment everything truly fell apart. In a moment where he believed they could thrive and reestablish themselves somewhere in the north, despite the mass starvation they were facing, Saito would pin all these hardships and all of these failures, elements that were both in and out of his control, and Kengo disappearing. I wonder if that was just a matter of who was the first to go and would have ultimately been the true person to be blamed for everything, because much of Saito's mentality seems to be on everything happened because Kengo left. Not necessarily of just who Kengo was, but the fact that he was his closest friend and the master swordsmith does make the blow that much more significant. It's also important to note that leaving at an exact moment where unity was so necessary to the hope of salvation and rectifying the situation was equally as tied to Saito's own level of power and continued control. Hence, Kengo leaving was the moment Saito had to accept the reality of the situation, but his inability to face the facts as they were became this complicated moment where his failures didn't reflect the dire situation he was in, but rather the insubordination and defection of his best friend. It highlights just how fragile Saito's psyche really was at that point in time. His delusions predated the biggest one of everything falling on Kengo, as he just refused to face the facts as they were. As hard as it was to watch his closest friend leave, and with him many others follow, Saito's biggest blow was yet to come. That would be the death of his young daughter, who would be a victim of the mass starvation they were suffering from. However, Saito's wife, who quickly died after, wasn't a victim of the starvation but of suicide. Out of the unbearable pain of watching her young daughter die, she would then kill herself. Their deaths would similarly be placed on Kengo. What I find most fascinating and equally as tragic is it would be while still mourning his wife and daughter that Saito would start being hunted by bounty hunters. One in particular he would come to call relentless, and that was Hanbei. Eventually, Saito would face Hanbei, and instead of outright killing him, he would opt to take his arm. In his eyes, it was a move of mercy that could have been a bit of humiliation for Hanbei on the back end. However, it's that mercy ploy that's the most interesting part, because for Saito, he's still a lord despite being called an outlaw and actively hunted. The deaths of his wife and daughter is also a turning point. It's the moment where he starts harboring cruelty, hatred, anger, resentment, all of these feelings directed at Kengo. Much of it is deeply personal for him, yet when preparing for the Night of the Burning Tree, he continues to say that he needs to make an example out of them. In previous videos, I've highlighted how he refrains and feels remorseful when it comes to Atsu, even apologizing, possibly seeing his daughter in her and thus tugging at the internal paternal instinct, but he has long made his mind up. The mix of duty, revenge, personal, and the need to make examples are all intertwined. In his letters, he talks of how he sang songs and wrote poetry in order to connect with his deceased loved ones, while also saying his sons are his left and right hand. They will continue on his legacy, yet in cutscenes as we see, his sons are nothing more than disappointments that reflect more and more unfavorably on him. Really, it's quite unfortunate that there's so many contradictions inside of Saito's own letters, and we don't see so much of that on screen. I think it would have served his mentality and this duality that there's a deep sense of hatred, anger, and as he says, that revenge that he harbors by showing a little bit more on screen. How in this rebirth of Clan Saito on the island of Ezo, there was real punishments at his own hand to those that disobeyed or performed unfavorably. We heard the story directly from Oyuki of how he intentionally branded her with Master Kengo's own swordsmithing tools in front of the other Yotei 6 members to make sure that she swallowed her screams and didn't betray the fact that she was a woman, which would have only invited more punishment and unthinkable things at the hands of the other Yotei 6 members. On his way to his execution, the spider also mentions of how his father would have done so much more worse to him and his brother had the two of them not shot the kids that night of the burning tree. These accounts seem to only reinforce a similar duality he has with Atsu. He slaughters her family yet apologizes for what needs to be done. Later in life, when he discovers she in fact is still alive and she's the one that's dismantling all his efforts here in the north, there's no longer any hatred or even a desire to finish what he started so many years ago. Instead, he's completely fascinated, perhaps even a little happy that she's still alive, trying to win her over by comparing his way of doing things to the Shogun and the other established clans, even amusing himself by inviting her to a spar by seeing what exactly she's learned over the last 16 years. Naturally, as he is the main antagonist, it only feels right to some degree to compare him to the Khan from the previous Ghost game. And while there's so much more there with Saito in terms of breadcrumbs, mental insights, family dynamics, and even a deeply punitive side to him, it kind of pales in comparison to the Khan and how the two of them are presented, which is unfortunate because there's so much to this imposter of a Shogun. But I'm going to be saving that comparison for the next video. Subscribe if you're interested in that. Until then, don't forget to download Raid Shadow Legends using the link in the description or scan the QR code to get 2 free epic champions for new players and plenty of extra bonuses to get you started.